Hello, everyone. We are so glad that you're here. I'm Dr. Lindsay Koch. I am our leadership development practice leader at Transform Forward. And we are just really appreciative for you joining us today. Whether you have joined out of curiosity, maybe frustration, or just a genuine desire to improve your team gatherings, we're hopeful that you'll walk away with tangible ideas and some inspiration. Today, we're going to explore the art of the purposeful offsite. At the start, we want to acknowledge that these gatherings go by many names that vary across industries. So you may call them offsites, retreats, summits, or something else. We'll use these terms pretty interchangeably today. In general, we're talking about those somewhat rare gatherings that are more than a typical meeting and that the facilitator wants to be impactful. So I'm joined today by our founder and CEO, Dr. Adam Cebulski, and he's going to share a little about Transform Forward.
Thank you. So before we dive in, just a quick word about Transform Forward. We are a organizational transformation and leadership development firm, and we really focus on helping organizations navigate change with purpose and clarity. That could be strategic planning, it could be leadership development, or team training. So our work spans industries from education to government to corporate sectors, and we really try to blend research-based frameworks with real-world experience to help teams better work together, lead better, and build cultures that actually thrive. Simply put, change starts here. So as Lindsay mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of Transform Forward. I'm a former chief of staff turned strategy consultant and executive coach. I've worked across multiple sectors. I've been a leader in higher education, in the tech industry. I've served in nonprofit leadership, but really I've spent my whole career helping people and organizations navigate complex change with clarity and purpose. Along the way, I've developed a strong belief that offsites and retreats aren't just events, they're leverage points. When designed intentionally, they become really powerful moments to align teams, to reset culture, and really build lasting momentum. Whether you're planning a leadership retreat, a strategy session, or just a team reset, how you gather matters, and we're here to help you make it count.
So, as Adam said, or as I introduced myself earlier, I am Dr. Lindsay Koch, and I deeply love a well designed team gathering. I've participated in and facilitated team gatherings across many industries and for a host of different purposes. So while each individual gathering is unique, over the years, I've honed in on several keys to creating experiences worth participating in. And I'm really excited to unpack some of what I've learned and some of what we've learned in our work at Transform Forward together today. Before joining Transform Forward as the leadership development practice leader, I worked in higher education administration and nonprofit management. My doctoral work is in leadership theory, and yes, I sneak a lot of leadership theory into designing impactful gatherings.
So, at our organization, we've had the privilege of designing and facilitating all kinds of offsites. You may call them retreats, like Lindsay said, but we'll get to sort of that nomenclature in just a second. So, we've done everything from intimate leadership retreats in the mountains, focused on connection and trust, to high stake visioning sessions across organizations where teams are trying to align fast. We've worked with universities, tech companies, nonprofits, and everything in between. And while every organization is different, our approach stays the same. We treat offsites as more than just meetings in a different location. To us, they're experiences. We think every detail matters because the little things create the conditions for the big breakthroughs. That's why people are often surprised by how intentional everything feels when we show up. From the moment someone walks into the room, we want them to feel like they're a part of something that's thoughtfully crafted with them in mind and not something that's just happening to them. Even our participant folders are a bit of an experience. They're not just handed out, they have to be unlocked in some way to engage, setting the tone for curiosity interaction. And we also bring things you might not expect. Dice, because let's be honest, there's nothing like a little random chance to spark new thinking. Markers, sticky notes, Play-Doh, mini toys, we've got it. And none of it's just fluff. Everything we bring has a purpose, whether it's into sparking play or tapping into different learning styles. or really helping people connect with creativity. For us, these tools really become part of that learning and alignment process. And by the end of the day, participants feel it. They walk away knowing that something shifted, not because we ran through a packed agenda, but because they were invited into an experience where their time, input, and full selves mattered.
So, before we dive into some specifics, a quick logistical note: closed captions are available if you're using the Google Chrome browser. So, if you're using Chrome, you can select to turn captions on. We are excited to let you know a little bit more about where we're headed this afternoon. We'll start by acknowledging why cultivating artful onsites even matters. We'll talk through some best practices and common pitfalls. We'll dive into the essential elements of creating impactful gatherings, and we'll wrap up by sharing a toolkit of activities you can use to enhance your own offsites. If we have time at the end, we will do some Q&A if you want to stick around for that.
So let's start with why this matters. We love the saying, if you're going to gather, gather well. And we really take that to heart. So offsites and retreats come in all shapes and sizes. Some have big budgets and big agendas. Others are smaller and more intimate. Smaller teams or limited resources. And some bring people together who've never met in person, who work across time zones and screens. And others are folks who sit 10 feet across from each other in a cubicle every single day. But no matter the scale, the goal is usually the same: to use the time differently than you would in a normal meeting during your normal workday, and to really step out of the day to day rhythm and reset or reconnect or realign. And that's why intentionality matters. When we gather with purpose, we create the conditions for people to think differently, engage more openly, and actually feel the experiences. Without the thoughtfulness, without that clear intention, it's really easy for a retreat to just feel like another meeting at worst, or a missed opportunity, right? Intentional design also doesn't have to mean fancy. You'll see throughout today, we're going to provide you lots of different examples of things you can do at different scales. But what it means is thinking about why you're gathering, who the people are in the room, and what they need to feel safe and energized, and how every moment can serve that bigger purpose of what you're trying to do.
So let's dive into some best practices for impactful offsites. These are mostly simple and easy to implement suggestions. First, actually go offsite, or at least to a different space than you usually gather. This physical change helps break the routine, and it signals to participants that this gathering is different. A novel location also helps with memory retention, allowing participants to associate their memories of that experience with the unfamiliar physical space. Another key practice is to intentionally build in time for breaks. This isn't wasted time, it's essential for attention and creative thinking. It's common for facilitators to fail to take into account the need for bio breaks or opportunities for people to move around. Unfortunately, all of our attention spans are shrinking, but providing well timed breaks can help people stay focused when it matters. And we always advocate for time to have some fun. Maybe this is wrapping the meeting an hour early to allow time for a happy hour gathering. Or if your retreat spans multiple days, going to a local sporting event or a concert together. It could also be as simple as a funny convo prompt during lunch to get people laughing. An example might be, what was the first CD you ever purchased? And depending on the age range of your team, some may have never purchased a CD. This realization alone can infuse some laughter and humor into a gathering, and we encourage that. Really, anything that gives people a chance to connect outside of the formal agenda is beneficial. Lastly, in a time where pretty much everything is digital, we have found that using tactile elements makes a huge impact. So we're talking about the things like Adam mentioned before, things that people can touch and feel and interact with to make the experience more memorable. And again, to keep people alert and engaged. So Adam mentioned a few of these. We regularly use dice. We often use an hourglass timer, like a game timer, instead of just a digital timer. We'll use poker chips to help break people into groups. That's just a few examples, but we've seen that it really helps to make the experience more tactile.
Now, we've also seen that there are some pretty common pitfalls that we see when we're working with folks on offsites, and there are easy ways to avoid those. So, one is using the wrong name. So, this goes back to the purpose conversation. Words really shape expectations. If you call something a retreat, but it's really a strategy work session with a packed agenda and deliverables, people are going to show up expecting downtime or connection and then be thrown off by spreadsheets and slide decks. On the flip side, if you call it a working session, but you've built in time for trust building and reflection, folks might undervalue it before they even walk in the door. So, first, name it what it really is and what you want it to be. Second is allocating too little time. Offsites often get squeezed into unrealistic windows. We're going to say a half day for a culture reset or 2 hours for long term visioning. That's underestimating that. And while we know that time is precious, if you don't leave enough time for the actual thinking, the dialogue, and the rest and the breathing space, you won't get the outcomes you're hoping for. So people really need the time to shift gears and engage differently. And then thinking about the third item is letting it feel too normal. So I know that may seem a little bit strange, but if it just feels like another Tuesday, same setting, same dynamic, same format, you're going to get the same results. So offsite should intentionally feel like a shift. That doesn't mean you need to go to the woods or rent out a cabin, but it does mean being intentional about how people experience the day. That's the pace, the tone, the setting, the way they're asked to participate. And then finally, another common pitfall is skipping those extra touches. So those little details, whether those are welcome notes or tactile materials like Lindsay mentioned, music in the background during those breaks or transition periods, or even how lunch is set up. These things tell people this matters. You matter, right? And that's the important part of what we want them to get out of the onsite. Those extra touches don't have to be expensive, but they should feel thoughtful, which is a word you're going to hear a lot during today's webinar, because how we gather signals how we value each other.
So now, after those best practices and common pitfalls, you're likely thinking about which of those best practices and pitfalls you've experienced, either as a participant or a facilitator. So, with those in mind, we want to move into what we believe are the essential elements for designing impactful gatherings. Those are, put simply, clarifying your purpose, designing for experience and engagement, and protecting the gathering. If hosts and facilitators pay attention to each of these elements, gathering can go from fine to fantastic. So, diving into our first essential, clarifying the purpose. This clarity in purpose is the one non-negotiable for every offsite, and it's the very first step in designing really any gathering. No offsite is going to be successful if the purpose isn't clear. So Adam mentioned this a little bit with you calling it the right name. We also really want you to avoid that shopping cart agenda of an offsite where you've probably participated in something like this, where facilitators try to cram 17 disparate goals into a single event. But knowing the purpose of the gathering can help make every other decision and help you clarify what should really happen during that gathering.
So, as we think about that, we really want to dig into this clarification of the purpose a little bit more. Because, again, the words we use to describe this gathering are going to shape how people show up for them before they ever walk in the door. So, if you're calling something a retreat, folks are going to expect that breathing room, that personal connection, and we want to make sure that they're not caught off guard when they walk in the door. Again, if you're on the flip side, if you're going to call it a working session, but then you've done trust falls and team building activities, they're going to feel a little bit of sense of dissonance of like, what's going on here? This is not what I thought this was going to be. Because maybe they were ready to grind through some tasks and think strategically, and now they have to shift that mentality on the spot. Words matter, and we talk about this because specifically they create mental models. So the name of the offsite is the first cue for your folks to get to understand how they should be preparing and approaching for that activity when that calendar invitation goes out. That is both practically speaking, like what might I legitimately need to prepare for, and what might I need to emotionally prepare for, right? And I'm, as a fellow introvert, The idea of knowing that I'm walking into a retreat versus strategy session is really important because I'm going to gear myself up a little differently for each of those. So call it what it is. And again, more importantly, call it what you want it to be, what you want those outcomes to be. So as we think about that, then we need to actually communicate that purpose. So we regularly support offsites where the leader knows the purpose of the gathering, but they give it maybe a generic title or they just say it's a blanket retreat, and they don't really tell participants what this actually is for and what the intended purpose is. So this again prevents participants from feeling well prepared and often leads to some misaligned expectations and disappointments. We all can pick the same word and define it very differently, and we're going to walk in with those expectations, and that's going to throw some folks off. So we really want to make sure that they are given the opportunity to walk in with the right preparation and the right headspace to really engage thoughtfully in what you're trying to accomplish at the offsite.
So, after honing in on the purpose for an offsite, it's really important to consider who will and won't be included. As an example, we want to share a little bit from a retreat that we're currently working on. We're preparing to facilitate a team retreat, and the purpose of this retreat is team building. We noticed in some of the data we received that some administrative staff were listed on the attendee list, and we hadn't previously understood them to be members of the team. So we checked in with the leader about their role in the group, and the leader clarified that they are not part of the team, but that they're going to be present to support the event. So this clarification really was crucial. Since they aren't members of the team, if we had included them in the team building activities, it would have been unnecessary and likely uncomfortable. So it's an example of a time where assuming or not being critical or not being thoughtful about who is in the room, who should be in the room, who's part of the group, who's there to experience it, could have either wasted time or left people feeling uncomfortable. Similarly, we often think the more the merrier, and we shy away from leaving people out. But being intentional about who should be invited and involved is an important way to ensure that the purpose of your gathering is achieved. If you don't have the right people gathered, you're not going to achieve the purpose that you have intended.
So now we think about the experience of this, and this is really where it all comes together. Because ultimately, the goal of an offsite is not just a meeting with better snacks, it's meant to be an experience. And experiences in any form or fashion, whether those are professional or personal, don't happen by accident, they're designed. There's a reason why there's a whole industry around planning events and experiences. So, really, what we encourage people to ask is this something I would want to participate in? So, as the planner, once you sort of design the experience, that should be your bar. If it's something that you're not going to find engaging or interesting, why would your participants? So, if that's the bar, when we talk about designing for experience and engagement, we mean being intentional about the small choices that people that'll shape how people are going to show up, how they feel, and how they react to this experience, and ultimately how they remember this experience. So, paying attention to detail isn't about perfectionism, which, as a perfectionist, that's hard for me to say, but it's really about signaling that people's time and energy matter, and they're going to know it right from the start, right? So, think about some of those thoughtful touches. Music as people walk in. Again, the tactile materials that we keep referencing, and we'll talk a little bit more examples of later. But even how you open and close the day. Those are going to be the things that people remember. And experiences build momentum. When people feel like they're going to be part of something meaningful, they're going to lean in. They connect more deeply, they contribute more openly. And again, it doesn't take a massive budget. So it just takes some thoughtfulness. I mean, you can reimagine common elements like icebreakers or team builders, note taking, goal setting, just by injecting a little bit of creativity. We'll talk about some of the examples that we use that you'll be able to get. But, really thinking about at the end of the day, you want people to feel something about the experience, even if it's a work experience. When you design for experience, you're actually shifting the energy from compliance to engagement. And that's going to be important when we're thinking about something that's not supposed to be a meeting. We're shifting it from passive attendance to active ownership. And we're starting to see what happens when we can do some real transformative efforts within our organization and our teams.
So, as we unpack our second essential of creating impactful experiences, we want to give you a sense of some of the activities that can do that. And so, as we're specifically thinking about activities that help build an experience, we're going to start by sharing one of our favorites. We call it the soundtrack to your life. This activity leverages music to foster deep connections among team members. Prior to the gathering, participants select a few songs that represent their past, present, and future, and they share their playlist with the facilitator. Then the facilitator conceals the ownership of the playlist and distributes one playlist to each participant. Participants review the songs on the mysterious playlist that they received, and they select a clip from a song that resonated with them. During the retreat, each team member tries to guess whose playlist they received. They then share the song clip from that playlist that resonated with them and explain their connection to that song. After everyone has guessed and shared their clip, the actual ownership of each playlist is revealed. We all love a reveal. We then ask everyone to share about their experience of building their own playlist and trying to guess whose list they received. The discussion is often hilarious, but it is always profound and really moving. This activity requires some pre-work, but that pre-work builds excitement for the experience or for the gathering, and it leads to shared moments that go beyond typical work conversations. So this is an activity that's an example of really crafting an experience and even thinking about that experience starting before the actual gathering. And so, as we mentioned, building momentum and trying to find ways to make it unique and creative. One last thing is that we do create a master playlist of all the songs. We incorporate the music into the retreat, as Adam said, trying to add different elements, using all the senses. And then we share the list with the participants. People really love it, and they share with us that they continue to listen to the playlist even after they're done.
So the next principle is really one of my favorites. It's really centered around embracing creativity. So as Lindsay mentioned, we are increasingly in a digital world. So tactile and sensory experiences can have a really surprising and lasting impact. So when you're designing an offsite, it's easy to focus solely on the agenda, the outcomes, but how people feel while they're engaging with that experience is what's going to stick with them. So we encourage teams to think about things beyond the slide deck. What are the people touching, seeing, hearing, even smelling? Give them things to hold, let them write or build or move. So the tried and true, you have Play-Doh, you have Legos, you have wood blocks. Sometimes it's dice. Sometimes it's a notebook they can doodle on for folks who need that outlet during specific activities. Whatever it is, those sort of creative elements are what's going to unlock a different kind of energy and engagement. And yes, it is having fun, but it's about fun with intention. When we give people permission to have fun and engage differently, oftentimes they're going to show up more fully. So we also talk in this realm about paying attention a lot. So those small touches where we can show people that they were seen in the design of this experience. For example, one of the things that I do with my team, we travel all over the country all throughout the year, and I pay attention. Not in a big brother kind of way, but I jot down notes of what snacks or drinks they're gravitating toward during client visits or what they're actively avoiding. I listen for some of the things that they say they love or that they can't have due to dietary restrictions. Jot it down in my phone. So when we do our own team retreat, that snack table isn't random. It's theirs, right? It's curated around what they like and what they enjoy, and each person kind of gets to see something they love. And oftentimes we get to tell a story about that item, about that particular offsite where we discovered that or found that snack because maybe it's regional. So it becomes a bonding moment in addition to a passive food that's happening at the retreat. Another thing we do in our retreats or our offsite is we think about ways in which we can share personal anecdotes or parts of our past or parts of who we are. So I'm originally from Chicago, but I live in Boulder now. So during our 4-day retreat, we always have a Chicago night. So I have deep dish pizzas and Italian beef shipped in because it gives me an opportunity to share a piece of home with my team. So the foods that I grew up on, the things that are signature to my place, um, and that sort of sticks, right? I get to share a piece of my history. So it's able to turn dinner into an experience, and we're able to connect on something deeper, even though it's something as superficial as food. It's also something that we think about. Offsites are often the time where organizations give gifts to employees. And I'm just going to say a padfolio or a t shirt with your company logo is not a gift, it's an obligation. It's branded merch, and maybe that's appropriate for a conference or a client, but that's not really what's going to feel special or meaningful to your employees. Instead, think about something that somebody would actually use or enjoy, something that feels like a gift, that's a real gift from a real person. So that could be if your team travels, something travel related that is functional and helpful for them. It could be, again, favorite snacks or a tool that supports their creativity or well being, or great gifts are intangible, like additional time off, right? So those thoughtful gifts reinforce the message of this gathering and the people in it matter. So there's the power of creativity in these spaces. So again, it's not just about what looks good on paper or what the slide deck looks like, but when we get creative with the environment, the tools, the food, even the rituals, um, we help people participate more fully. And that's really when transformation starts to take root. So, one of the things I want to share that we do a little bit differently than a lot of folks is how we approach goal setting. One of the goal setting activities we love to use with teams is called breaking news. And it's always kind of a different kind of moment in our retreats. Instead of just jumping straight into traditional goal setting or strategic planning, we ask participants to imagine that a front page article has just been written about them or about the team at the end of this retreat. So we asked them, what would they want the headline to say? What would story would they want to tell? So we hand out template styles like a newspaper, a front page cover above the fold, and ask them to get a little bit creative. So they're going to fill in a headline, a subheading, and then we're going to ask them to sketch a photo and include a quote as if they were being interviewed by a reporter the following day. It's intentionally a bit outside of the norm. And yes, some folks are hesitant at the start. You'll hear, I'm not creative or I can't draw to save my life. But within minutes, sort of they're laughing, they're scribbling, they're doodling, especially once they see what others are creating. And maybe not everyone in the room is an artist. And so it's a bunch of stick figures. And no, that's okay. What makes this activity so powerful is that it reframes aspirations through a storytelling lens. So instead of asking, what do you want to get out of this retreat? We're asking, what do you want the outcome to feel like? And that shifts help surface sort of the hopes, intentions, and anxieties in a more accessible and human centered way. Some people are also surprised by what their colleagues write. They wouldn't have expected that somebody was hoping to get that out of the day. Or they realize that they do have an artist in their midst and somebody was able to create a really cool graphic. But every time we really get some rich insights into what matters most to the people in the room. And that helps us, or whoever the facilitator is, shape the experience in a way that feels really meaningful. So let's talk about sort of this idea of openings and closings. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, and we really think about opening and closing more than just time markers. They really set the tone and shape how people remember that experience. You'll notice the image here on the screen is a hand holding a torch, and it's the nod to the Olympic torch, which is a really powerful symbol of beginning, of intention, of passing something forward. So for the Olympic ceremony, it is a big deal to think about the lighting of the Olympic flame. And that's what we're doing when we open a gathering with care. We're signaling that this matters, that something is being lit here. Far too often, we waste this time on logistics. We talk about housekeeping, we close with a slide full of next steps at the end, and all of that is a missed opportunity. The start should create presence, the end should create meaning. And whether that's a reflective question, a moment of silence, a story, or even just a thoughtful thank you or a round of kudos, it's really those moments that stick with folks. And they tell people this wasn't just a meeting, it was an experience. One of my absolute favorite ways to end and engage in an offsite is what we call drops in the bucket. You've probably heard the phrase, you can't pour from an empty bucket. So this activity is designed to help fill those buckets with appreciation and recognition and the kind of sort of specific gratitude that reminds people that their presence specifically makes a difference. So here's how it works. We bring buckets, small buckets, to on-sites, and we invite people throughout the course of that on-site to write notes to each other on drop-shaped pieces of paper. It might be a thank you for how they showed up to something, a moment of kindness, or something you admire about how they do their work. But everyone has that small bucket, that physical container. You could use Tupperware, you could use envelopes, whatever is going to work for you. And throughout those retreats, people write those drops and they drop them in the bucket. By the end of the gathering, people are often sort of hovering around their buckets because they see there are notes in there and they want to kind of see what are people saying. At the end, we always close with coming back to the buckets and saying, let's reflect on and do our gratitude, adding one last note to that person that you want to acknowledge. Um, and it's a powerful way to end the retreat because people get to take that with them and carry it forward. We always tell folks when you're having a particularly rough day or when your work doesn't feel like it matters, go back to your bucket, read those notes, pull it out, and the reminders of your value and your contributions and the way others experience your presence. And for teams that keep this going, oftentimes they will put those buckets in a central place in the office so that they serve as something that can be an ongoing tradition, and that anytime somebody can drop a note in that bucket and they can read those when they need to, it becomes a habit or a practice. And that builds a culture of recognition built from the inside out. It really is simple, but it's thoughtful. And for many people, it's unforgettable from that retreat.
So it's time to talk about our final essential element: protect the gathering. With a clear purpose in mind, it's critical to make decisions that protect that purpose and encourage every participant's full engagement. So, protecting the gathering includes establishing rules that support engagement and being willing to secure the support that you need to make an event successful. It's also really important for a leader to make it clear to the entire team, all of the participants, that the offsite truly matters and that it should be prioritized.
So, as we think about the next principle, it's all about protecting that everyone's experience, right? So, and that's one of the most often looked things or overlooked things. So it's simple. If someone is responsible for managing logistics for the offsite that we're talking about, they can't fully engage. They're in and out of the room, they're checking on food, they're setting up chairs, they're answering vendor texts. And while they're doing all of that, they're missing the very experience that they were meant to be a part of. And that's not just a bummer, it's a loss of insight, trust building, and shared alignment because we invited them to this, but then we're not actually allowing them to be a full participant. So we encourage teams to think ahead. How are you protecting everyone so that they can be present in that space? That might mean using an external facilitator. It might mean having extra hands from other teams on deck to help out, or it's just about making intentional design choices. So this sort of brings me to the pro tip on this slide of we know that not everyone has a full support staff or has the budget to hire an external vendor to work with them on an offsite. So if you can't have extra help on the day of, make the space and the time work for you. Print out a room or flow plan and give it to your caterers or helpers ahead of time. That way they're not asking questions of a participant and pulling them out and taking them out of that experience. And they can do what they need without sort of needing constant guidance from the team. You can also think about how you schedule particular activities. If you know somebody has to step away to handle a transition, like setting up lunch or prepping materials for the next session, rotate that role so it's not always the same person missing out. Or better yet, do it over breaks so that it aligns with the moments that maybe other people would pitch in and becomes a group thing, and then they're talking while they're doing those things. So the point is protect that experience. It doesn't just maximize your investment in asking people to do this. It makes everyone feel like their presence actually matters because they're not managing the day, they're experiencing it right alongside with everyone else.
So, as we continue to think about protecting the gathering, we think it's important to acknowledge that often, as hosts and leaders, our natural instinct is to be chill and relaxed, breezy. We don't want to seem like we're micromanaging or that we're being too intense. But the reality is, what we've learned is that a chill approach can sometimes backfire. Participants actually want to feel like a leader has a plan. They want to understand what's expected of them and those around them so that they can fully engage. And that's why we encourage establishing specific rules that govern your time together. These rules pull people out of their normal routines and make it clear that this time is unique. A great example is a tech free offsite. While we know many people may initially feel annoyed, they almost always come away appreciative of the tech break and amazed at how much easier it can be to connect without devices. Another role that we advocate for creating is requiring full attendance for the entire event. And while that might seem obvious, we know that that is not always the norm. So this rule would say there's no popping in and out for various reasons to attend a meeting or take a call. If the experience is intended to be shared, the whole experience should be shared. When it comes to rules, the key is to make it clear that the time is valuable and worth protecting. So, a key tool that we use that is as an example of a rule that helps protect the gathering is the parking lot. It's a fun way to maintain focus and protect the ultimate reason for gathering. The rule is no off topic discussions. The parking lot is a simple system for capturing important but off topic ideas for later. The facilitator provides what we call car cards, physical cards that have a picture of a car in reach of all participants. When conversations veer off course, and we know that they always do, anyone in the group can politely interject with something like, "This is an important topic, but it's not super relevant for our purpose today. Let's add it to the parking lot for later." Or even an individual. I know I can be guilty of catching myself drifting off, and I can be in the middle of a thought or a discussion. And even an individual can catch themselves and say, "I really want to address this, but I know this is kind of taking us off course. I'm going to add it to the parking lot so that we can come back to it." So someone writes the topic or idea down on a car card and places it in the parking lot. So that may be the printed out parking lot that we'll share in the toolkit. It could be an envelope or a box, a stack that everyone keeps. But those are collected and worked into agendas for future discussions. So those ideas physically are placed somewhere else to be brought back later. It shows your team that their ideas are valued without derailing the current conversation. We love this tool because it empowers every person in the room to help keep the group on track and stay with the role. We also really love the flexibility of this concept. You can use those physical cards, or you can simply designate a list that's taken in someone's notes or on a whiteboard for everyone to see, and that could become the parking lot, even if you don't have the cars in the parking lot with you. So, those are the essential elements. In review, it's critical for all gatherings to make sure that you are clarifying your purpose, designing for experience and engagement, and protecting the gathering. So, we've talked through our essential elements and highlighted a few activities that bring them to life. As promised, we have packaged these activities into our offsite activity toolkit. The toolkit's a practical guide for implementing these ideas in your own gatherings with step-by-step instructions and templates for each activity. We really want you to walk away from today and from this webinar equipped to take action strategically. It may not make sense for you to utilize all of these activities at every gathering, but we hope that you'll use this toolkit and share it with others in your organization. Maybe to require those on your team to facilitate some better offsites if you've participated, or if they're looking for ways to enhance offsites or retreats that they're responsible for. Share this tool and encourage them to build these activities in as well.
And as we wrap up, before we get to the Q&A, just a quick reminder, the Offsite Activity Toolkit we previewed today will be available for download. You'll receive an email with the link if you registered, so keep an eye out for that. And if you're thinking, we want support like this for our next retreat, we're here to help in a few ways. So if you want to fully participate without managing logistics, we offer full facilitation services. We'll design and run the offsite so you and your team can focus and stay engaged. Or if you're building it yourself and want a thought partner, we offer advisory sessions to help you structure a more thoughtful and creative, high impact experience. You're always welcome to reach out to us at the email on the screen. So with that, we're going to move over to Q&A.
All right. So we have covered a lot today. We do appreciate you joining us, and we are going to open the floor so you can utilize the chat box. If you have a question, you can drop that in. We are happy to take any questions. If you need to hop out, this is a great time to do that. We do want to end well with our gratitude to you for participation and our encouragement to utilize your toolkit well. If you have a couple of questions or if you want to stick around, we can drop those in as they roll in. So we have one that we want to share. So the concept of a singular purpose makes a lot of sense, but it feels like our team always has multiple priorities. How do you help leaders narrow down the purpose when everything feels important? Adam, is that one you wouldn't mind responding to?
Sure. I think one of the things when we think about prioritization is oftentimes things feel like a fire and we've got to address them quickly, whether that is a project-based thing or a leader is recognizing that maybe a team is not performing or engaging as well as they hope they would. We've got to sort of make sure that we're addressing the root cause of something and not just the symptoms. And when we say that an offsite or a retreat should have a singular purpose, we're not saying only one thing can happen at the retreat or that only one thing can be discussed. But we want to make sure that the end goal outcome feels cohesive, that we're not asking people to be really tactical 1 minute and then 25 minutes later, we're saying, hey, we want you to be high level strategic. So it may be about thinking, where do we need to start? Is it the macro level or the micro level? And how do we design these offsites or retreats to really get at that level? We also want to make sure that we're understanding that, again, the offsite or the retreat is not a work session. So as we're thinking about, balancing priorities, that often is getting toward the work happening. And that's sort of a different kind of engagement that may be closer to a strategy session or a workshop. And so being really intentional, and I'm going to say, like, just create that list. And as a team or a group or a leadership, have the conversation about what is sequential, what relies on what in order to be successful, and what are some of those root issues we have to address some of those priorities. That will really help you make sure that you're being intentional and that the ordering and the cadence of these different things feels like it's been thoughtfully crafted.
Thank you.
So we have another question that has come in previously. How do you deal with the logistics of some of the activities, especially ones that require pre-work? Lindsay mentioned earlier that Soundtrack to Your Life is something that folks complete and engage with before they get to the retreat, so they're ready for the retreat. What if people don't do the pre-work?
I'm sure we have all had this experience. Yes, that can be really frustrating. I would say we do a lot of work on the front end to do everything we can to have people complete it. And yeah, we have also had those times where people didn't get it done or didn't do it correctly, even though we gave them another chance. It can be a great opportunity to allow them to figure that out during the retreat, to see that maybe they misinterpreted the instructions that everyone else followed, or to allow the team to kind of come around them and say, like, I wish I would have known that, or I wish I would have been able to hear your response to that. And so I think you can use it as an opportunity to try and engage them however they can, but then to clarify the importance of engaging as a team, and that when people choose not to do that, it detracts from everyone's experience. So the reality is you'll always have that as an issue, and it's just managing it on the front end as best as you can, and then rolling with it and trying to use it as an opportunity during the retreat. So we are at time. We want to make sure that we wrap up when we said that we would, and send you on to the rest of your day. But we truly appreciate you being with us. We would love to engage with you, so feel free to reach out, and we appreciate you joining us. We hope that you have an excellent time at the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.